Hi there, come on in. I'm Fred Trost and I'd like you to join me for the next half hour. We have a gangbusters show. We're going to start off with a feature on bow hunting, showing the three stages of bow hunting: the traditional long bow, the recurve bow, which was an improvement, and now the high-tech compound bow. Show you how they work and the pros and cons. We have a great story on what's called layout duck shooting and a recipe for venison stroganoff you're going to absolutely love, so you stay tuned. I'm Fred Trost. It's time for the Outdoor Digest. Bow hunting. What romance. Waiting in a blind in the early fall for a deer to come within range, and you're going to hunt like the Indians with a bow and arrow. Today there are three basic bows to choose from, and each has its advantages. Bow number one, the long bow. It's just a stick and a string, the most primitive and simple. Bow number two, an improvement in the long bow called a recurve, because the ends of the limbs have reverse curves that give extra snap, extra speed to the arrow as the bow straightens out. And bow number three, the modern compound bow. A complex string system rolls over pulleys or cams, and this kind of bow is the fastest of all. When the string is released and the cams roll over, the arrow builds up speed and whips out of the bow. Compound bows have lots of moving parts and they come pre-strung, but the other two, you string yourself. Remember the old style of putting your leg between the bow and the string, arcing it and latching the string over the end? Well, that's the worst way to string a bow because it twists the limbs unevenly, and over time you'll deform your bow. A better way is to put one end of the bow under the arch of your boot, pull the bow from the middle, and slide the string over the end. That way the limbs are pulled evenly, but it is more difficult to string a bow this way. The best way and safest is to use a bow stringer. Attach it to both ends, step on it, and pull. Presto, your bow is strung safely without twisting the limbs. Always check your bow visually to see that the string is seated properly and pull it back to make sure. These three bows don't shoot the same arrows. For the long bow, cedar shafts are the most popular because they're traditional, like the long bow. The wood absorbs shock and straightens out fast when it comes out of the bow. But one problem with cedar arrows is that they're not all uniform. Recurve and compound shooters are more likely to choose aluminum shafts. Manufactured to exact specifications, a batch is virtually identical, plus they're stronger than cedar. And the screw-in machine tips allow archers to use a variety of arrowheads and change them. And with cedar shafts, well, they're usually pointed and one head is glued on. A new arrow in the marketplace is graphite. Lighter and narrower, faster speed and better penetration. The problem is they haven't been able to manufacture them with uniform straightness. But when they do, this is the high-tech arrow of the future. Arrows must be matched with the bow so it can handle the acceleration and fly straight. On the traditional longbow, the arrow rests on a shelf and there's quite a bit of friction, which is why longbow shooters use the traditional feather fletching. As the arrow leaves the bow, the feathers fold so the arrow stays on course. A problem with feathers is that they aren't too durable. That's why the modern shooters usually choose plastic vanes instead. They hold up under a lot of abuse, but they don't give as much and they're not as flexible. So on recurves, you'll usually find a plastic arrow rest. It doesn't give as much resistance to the arrows or the vanes. And if you're a high-tech shooter, maybe with an overdraw, you'll want a mechanical arrow rest, one with lots of moving parts so you can adjust it. So there's exact clearance for the vanes. They'll never touch the rest as the arrow leaves the bow. Eliminates the chance of wobble. And the overdraw, well, you can see how it places the arrow rest behind the bow grip, closer to the archer. That allows for a shorter arrow. What's the advantage? Well, shorter arrows are a bit stiffer. They don't torque as much when launched from a high-speed compound, and a shorter arrow can have smaller diameter. It'll be lighter and faster. So quite a few high-tech archers have put overdraws on their hunting bows so they can shoot the faster, smaller arrows. Now what about pulling back the string? Three ways to do it. The grip we're all familiar with, one finger over the top, two under. That helps hold the arrow in place, but it can also put pressure on the arrow as you draw it and release it. Some shooters get excited or tense and actually bend the arrow down by squeezing that finger on top. A second way is 3 fingers under, sometimes called the Apache draw. The advantage? Well, you don't touch the arrow. Allows it to leave the string cleaner. And the high-tech answer to all this, a mechanical release. Clip it to the string, pull it back, and touch it off, much like you would a gun. The advantage is consistency. The string is released exactly the same way each time, so there's no doubt shooters who use release aids can consistently be more accurate. And speaking of accuracy, how do you aim these things? The longbow is most often shot instinctively. No sights. The shooter concentrates on the target and through practice learns to hit what he's shooting at. That's instinctive. A lot of recurve and compound shooters use sight pins. The idea is you line up the string with your eye and the sight pin, and if you hold the bow the exact same way each time, you should be able to hit what you're aiming at. Some people anchor at the corner of their mouth with their middle finger. Some use the Apache draw, which puts the arrow higher under their eye. And I learned to use 3 fingers under, anchoring underneath my chin, running the string right up the middle of my nose. I line up the sight pin with the string and my eye, at the same time squeezing my back to hold my bow arm straight and solid, then relax my hand to release the arrow. So here we have 3 different bows, 3 different shooting systems. Which one are you going to choose? Well, how about the high-tech, the compound? There's a couple big advantages. One, it's a very fast shooting bow. The arrows are flat shooting, which means if you misjudge on your sight pins, up to 30 yards, your arrow might only be off an inch or 2. Another big advantage of compounds. They're difficult to pull back. There's 60 pounds of draw weight. Now I'm holding about 30. Once the cams kick over, the energy is stored up there, so they're relatively easy to hold. That's a big advantage for senior archers, handicappers, people with weak arms. So why the interest in longbows and recurves? Well, they're not as fast as compounds, but they're plenty fast for deer hunting. In fact, these are the bows that Fred Bear used after all. So you should choose a bow that you're comfortable with, that you enjoy shooting, and be sure to practice. That's the key to successful bow hunting. Practice, no matter which bow you choose.
You know, your choice of equipment, you decide on a type like I have and said, this is it. This is the ultimate. I just love it. The rest of my life I'm going to use this kind of bow. Somehow, after 4 or 5 years, a lot of shooters change their mind. They do the same thing with fishing equipment, go from fly fishing to spinning to cane pole. It just adds a lot of variety to the outdoors. And with any of this type of equipment, you can get a trophy big enough to qualify for our trophy book.
Here's a trophy steelhead trout, 16 pounds even, caught by Deborah Winans. Walter Pockle's perch was 15.5 inches long and 1 pound 13 ounces. At 22 pounds 12 ounces, Gloria Borland had her hands full of carp. Mr. Walleye J. Edwards shows off an 11 pound 7 ouncer he caught in the middle of the night. And Edwin Babula's bear dressed out at a whopping 370 pounds. Here's an Ohio buck, an 11-pointer with a 21-inch spread. William Martin took this bruiser. Eric Rapp's gobbler weighed 20.25 pounds, and he called it in. Here's William Knight with a 13-pointer with a 23-inch spread. He took it with a bow. But what kind of bow?
Longbow.
A longbow.
Yep, I was out. I started about 1 o'clock, and I was stump shooting, and I started seeing a few rabbits, and it started to look like that's all I was going to see. So I came over the top of this hill, and I seen some movement at the bottom of the hill, and I thought it was a rabbit. So I made a stalk on it, got pretty close. Turned out to be a rooster pheasant. About 15, 20 feet, there was another rooster pheasant. He was laying down right between both of them. I couldn't get a shot through the brush. So I tried to shoot over, and when I did, I shot over the top of him. He turned around, looked right at me, turned and looked the other way. I moved up about 3 feet, got down as low as I could, shot underneath the brush, made a pretty good hit on him. He went about 100 yards.
Oh, it's a great story. You made a great shot. And all of this adds up to a great reason to make you, William Knight, our Outdoor Digest Trophy Deer Hunter of the Week. The Isaac Walton League is calling for strong oil spill liability laws that make companies and individuals responsible for all of the costs of a spill. Now, the league points out that such legislation could prevent future spills if tough enough. The Isaac Walton League is one of the country's oldest conservation organizations. Wisconsin is looking at the prospect of introducing elk into the Badger State. Biologists feel elk might fit well into the available habitat. Moose are also being looked at, but a number of moose from Minnesota and Michigan occasionally make their way through Wisconsin already. Great Lakes State's fisheries chiefs are beginning to get together several times a year. Now, this move was really precipitated by the salmon crash of the last several years. Some fisheries chiefs see standardizing size and daily limits on salmon and trout as being developed across the Great Lakes. Winchester has introduced a disposable 35mm camera. The camera comes in a waterproof bag, takes 24 pictures, and is in a camouflage case. Other companies are also making disposable 35mm cameras, which are a good idea for the fishing tackle box or the day pack. Although duck numbers are down all over North America, goose numbers are in great shape. 1989 season prospects are excellent all over. Hottest place to be for geese? Probably Saskatchewan, where in certain times and certain seasons there's an 8 goose per day limit. Oh! Rick Klein has a problem. See, Rick lost an arm and can no longer shoot a bow, but he'd like to join his buddies again during his state's bow season. Rick asked his state representative to consider a bill to allow one-armed folks to use crossbows. His representative knows hunting and the legislature and told Rick that with a strong anti-crossbow sentiment, the bill would probably never pass. Rick then asked about using a gun. His representative met with the state's Department of Natural Resources, bow hunters groups, and others, and they decided a shotgun for certain handicapped hunters would be an acceptable compromise, and the bill easily passed the House. Now the problem. Another handicapper group has opposed the shotgun bill's passage in the state Senate, still holding out for legalizing crossbows. The bill to help handicapped hunters is now stalled and may not even survive. And after 2 years of work caught between crossbows and his one arm, Rick Klein still doesn't have even the hope of a 4-string quarterback of getting into the game this season.
The sporting dogs known as setters are used as pointing dogs by hunters. What were they originally trained to do? Before the 1800s, setters were supposed to do just that, set or crouch before the game they had located.
Steel shot is becoming the required shot for waterfowl hunters throughout the USA. It's a proven way to take ducks and geese quickly and cleanly, but it does have different properties and shoots a little differently than traditional lead shot. Now, here are a couple of guidelines to remember. Use a steel shot about 2 sizes larger than customary lead shot shells. For example, number 4 steel is equivalent to number 6 lead. Number 2 steel is equivalent to number 4 lead, and T-shot in steel is equivalent to BB lead. Now, the larger size steel pellet will have about the same weight as a smaller lead shot. And use a more open choke in the gun when shooting steel shot because steel shot shells pattern tighter than lead shells. If a full choke was used with lead, try modified with steel. Not all brands of guns and chokes will produce the same pattern, so hunters should pattern their guns with several steel loads at normal hunting distances to find the pattern which best fits their own situation. Remember, make sure your targets are in range. Most of us are not consistently good shots at ranges beyond 45 yards. And after patterning the various steel loads, try it on pheasants. Number 2 steel on pheasants works extremely well, and because of its denseness and its very dense pattern, try number 4 steel on turkey head patterning targets. You'll probably discover an excellent pattern at distances up to and exceeding 40 yards.
A big lake like Houghton Lake has an advantage for duck hunters. It attracts two kinds of ducks, the puddle ducks, mallards and pintails that dabble close to shore, and the divers, bluebills, redheads, ducks of the open water. Jerry Martz from Perry is the DNR's waterfowl specialist, and he hunts both kinds of ducks. Today his boat is loaded with 80 open water decoys. The net is to pick up the ducks that are taken. Now, Jerry's bigger boat is painted in a camouflage that matches the wild rice and cattails. He hunts from this boat close to shore for the puddle ducks. In open water, the layout boat is where the hunters sit. Well, actually, they lay down. And this boat is camouflaged a slate gray, which matches the open water. Ted Hebert from Langsburg and I are in another boat as we all head towards the wide open spaces of this big lake. Ted is looking for rafts of bluebills, 1,000 or more. Jerry relies on Ted to locate birds, and it isn't long before he spots a huge raft.
Okay, head that way. Did he come? I think I got him. Hey, they're getting up. Where? They're getting up. They're going to be against the sky in a minute.
Today's an ideal day for duck hunting. The wind keeps the ducks flying.
Now, if these were fresh birds, these would be a riot to hunt. These have been burned pretty heavy, although I don't know. I see a lot of white in there.
There's an awful lot of...
A lot of white. That means new birds.
Yeah, there's a lot of birds in there.
Jerry's excited. He's looking over here. He's ready.
Into them now.
Oh, those are bluebills. That whole cloud's bluebills over there.
When we finally get to where they want to hunt, Ted slides into Jerry's boat with the decoys so they can set up. First of all, they position the layout boat. Now, they put this boat upwind of the decoys, and it's anchored on both the front and the back to hold it steady so it won't sway back and forth as the wind shifts. Now, 2 hunters can fit in this boat at one time, laying on their back so they blend in at water level. The boat stays anchored, no paddles, no oars, no motor, so when ducks are knocked down, the fellow in the big boat, called the tender boat, that's upwind about a quarter of a mile, runs down and picks up the ducks for the layout hunters. Lots of decoys are used in layout shooting, usually about 80, sometimes up to 120. They're not on individual lines with anchors like puddle duck decoys. About 10 or 12 are attached to a mother line, and the whole string is set up with an anchor at each end. So you end up with 7 or 8 strings of decoys downwind from the layout boat. The investment in decoys, well, if you had to buy all these, you're looking at maybe $800. And a lot of the serious layout shooters make many of their own. You can imagine what it's like when the wind picks up, like it often does in the fall. Tangled lines are all a part of layout hunting. They're a part of the challenge which attracts hunters to this kind of hunting. Decoys are set, layout boat is in place, time to climb in. To start, Ted Hebert and I will take the first shift. This is probably the most dangerous part of layout hunting, transferring in and out of the layout boat. Now, today it's not bad. The open water is relatively calm, it's warm. The real danger is in freezing weather when you get a thin layer of ice on the gunnels of the boat, sometimes over the entire layout boat. We get situated, then Jerry and cameraman John Ford back away to watch from a distance. The hunt has just about begun. We lay with the guns across our chests, barrels pointed towards the decoys. Now, granted, this isn't the most comfortable position to be in, but after you get used to having scrunched feet, this reclined posture can be quite enjoyable as long as you're dry and warm. When the ducks come in, you set up quickly and shoot. Otherwise, you lay quietly, scanning the horizon with your eyes. John is taping from another layout boat and quickly watches us miss. The shooting is fast, and John found it was difficult to see what was happening from so far behind us, so he climbed in the layout boat with me. There, that's better. You can see the rows of decoys. The farthest one is about 40 yards, so if the ducks are over the decoys, they're in range. From only a foot or so above water level, it's a challenge to spot those ducks.
Right down over there, right over there.
2 ducks coming in fairly high, too far away. Lay still and watch for more. It won't be long. There they come. No, I think they're going to lift. Oh, here comes 3 more. 3 more from this side. Oh, this one might be. No. They might swing around and take another look.
Okay, this one is close enough right here.
There we go.
Fast shooting, but that's a dead bird on the water, so I won't call the tender boat in quite yet.
It's just floating there. Here comes some more working. Boy, there's lots of birds working.
Oh, here they're coming this way. We got a group of them. I don't know if they're going to be too high. These are too high. They might go coming down. I have two bluebills on the water now, so we stand up in the layout boat so the tender can see us. That's the signal to come down and pick up our ducks. It's teamwork, layout shooting, which makes it fun. By the way, it's not as dangerous as it looks to stand up in a layout boat. They're incredibly stable. We point out where that last duck is, he picks it up, and by sundown, we had a good mess of ducks for a recipe. Ah, the hunt's over, and we're feeling good.
It was a great day.
Does this classify as a great day, not a barn burner, or?
It was a good hunt. The birds responded well to our setup. Everybody got some shooting and got a few birds.
What more could you ask for?
We didn't get any limits, but it was a fine day.
It was outstanding. Outstanding! I tell you, I've never had shooting like that before. That is different.
Layout shooting is different. Jerry Martz and Ted Hebert put me on the water with the ducks, an exciting way to gather a wild duck dinner.
One facet of layout shooting that makes it different from an awful lot of other types of hunting is that it's not just a totally individual type of hunting. Takes a team, takes somebody in the tender boat, and you switch off, and it's a dimension of hunting that's a little bit different. But what do you do with those ducks when you bring them back? Don't just roast them all the time and stuff them. Do different things with them. Try them like steak on the grill. You could even grind up the duck meat. Honest, try it in this recipe for venison stroganoff.
Jamie Zavitz has sent us a recipe for stroganoff using venison burger.
Oh, no. Kath, venison burger in a recipe. Maybe venison burger will be different, but plain old burger and stroganoff is like school lunch.
It's kind of grade school days.
Oh, grade school all the way. I just have never cared for it. Maybe with the venison burger, though.
It does lend a different taste to it. And I'm going to go ahead and fry this in oil because there's not a lot of fat in the venison burger. I'm going to add onions and celery, and you do want to use canned mushrooms because you want to reserve the liquid for later. Add a little bit of salt and pepper and the beef flavored broth and some garlic salt and some flour for just a little bit of thickening here. And I'm going to let that all fry down together. And then I'm going to add some strohs and there's your beef or your mushroom liquid going back in.
Liquid?
Now this will dissipate. The alcohol will dissipate from this, and it's just going to leave kind of a tangy flavor to the
Sort of fire brewed.
Yes, to the meat. And then just let that cook down. And then rather than thickening it with cornstarch or anything, you're going to add mushroom or
Chip
dip. Green onion.
French onion chip dip.
You use just about any kind you wanted, but it's excellent.
Well, there it is, that burger I never have been too wild about. But this is venison burger. And the thing is, Kath, this burger didn't come from Bob or you or I.
The venison burger, of course, I have to say it's from my wife's buck she got last year. But this venison burger didn't have a lot of fat on it, and it tastes excellent in the stroganoff.
Very, very good. I was surprised at using a hamburger.
If this was made with hamburger, it would take us back, some of us, 30 years to school lunch.
Yes.
Really, but this is, the venison makes a world of difference.
through.
Oh, it tastes really
Very
great.
The thing of it is, there's a good, sharp, tangy taste to it. It's not like institutional food or whatever. A good, sharp, tangy taste. Yeah, I could eat this. It's maybe nature's most perfect venison burger recipe. It is.
You don't have to go far for this recipe, which works well with all small game, even chicken.
If you started watching Outdoor Digest this summer, you might wonder, where have the fishing shows gone? Well, we aren't just a fishing show or a hunting show. We're an outdoor show that does fishing and hunting as food gathering activities, and it's hunting season now in the fall. So we're going to have hunting shows well into December, and then we'll get back into ice fishing and a great summer ahead. So stay tuned and join us, please, next week.
If you're a deer hunter and you've been buying those sex scents, the ones that say they're made from doe and estrus and they're going to attract the big bucks, I got some news for you. I'm going to state my case why I think the sex scent industry in many cases has been a scam. I have evidence, I have logic, I'm laying it all out, so join me for the sex scent scam next week right here, same time, same station.